Some Dolphins fans are wondering what the holdup is for the Dolphins to get some extra personnel moves going this summer. We're going to explore exactly what the issue at hand is here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami and Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. You're on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, the popular question that's being asked this week as Shaquille Griffin signs with the Seattle Seahawks is, what are the Dolphins waiting for? They have a need at corner. They've apparently made at least one contract offer, but are holding firm to the price of that offer because there's been no movement in getting a new cornerback in here in the midst of Tyreek Hill's quest to recruit and full court press Jalen Ramsey back. I don't think that's why we're waiting for any kind of movement here as it pertains to the cornerback situation in Miami. But I do think it's worth zooming out, which is one of my favorite things to do when we have these popular pressing questions. And at the core of the issue for Miami is we talk about team life cycles. We talk about teams in transition. We talk about cash spending, cash over cap. These are things that we've talked about in past episodes throughout the course of the offseason, but I don't think we've necessarily quantified this storyline in a way that I think properly underlines and underscores what the Dolphins are having to do this offseason and why I view a reduced urgency to continue to spend an accelerated rate has anything to do with Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel and has to do, again, with the long-term health of the organization, regardless of what the results are in the here and now. I just think it happens to coincide with a season in which the team was frustratingly short of expectations, right? So what I have done is I have collected, according to Spot Track, over the last 10 years, each team's rank in the NFL in cash spend, how much cash they spent on payroll for every season in each of the last 10 years, and ranked them all 1 through 32. And what I found was interesting, and it kind of underscores why the Dolphins currently care about cash versus cap. Because you can do, and we've said this in past off seasons and off-season blueprints and all that kind of stuff, you can do whatever you want to do for a period of time in the NFL. But those ramifications of doing whatever it is that you want to do will eventually, sooner or later, come due. And it's a matter of, did you achieve the singular feat of a championship that would allow you to be given the grace needed to transition through whenever that big, mighty, nasty pill of reality comes due or not? And obviously that hasn't happened for the Dolphins, but that's why I think this year and this strategy is so important. And it feeds into some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday with the point of the build and how they lost the plot and they got big eyes for the shiny object and the big thing to go for and swing for the fences and surrender 5 draft picks for Tyreek Hill and a first round and a 4th round pick for Bradley Chubb and a 3rd round pick for Jalen Ramsey. And each one of those moves individually, like if you made one, you'd say, okay, yeah, it's a big opportunity. It's a great player you're bringing into the fray here. But when you did it 3 times over, and that's 8 draft picks. That's as many draft picks as you made in 2 years combined in the actual draft. as far as actual picks that you made. And that cost control versus $22+ million per year contracts for all three of those players. There's a cost to that. And I think you see that. I have it up here, and I'm going to put it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, no worries. We're going to talk through it. But the things that I found when I made the chart and graphed it out for where the Dolphins rank in cash spend, there was a need in the midst of a transition, unless you want to be the New Orleans Saints or the Cleveland Browns. You'd kind of reached that fork in the road that it was necessary. And I could tell you, the Cleveland Browns, the last 5 years in the NFL, have ranked third, first, and currently ranked fourth in cash spending in the last 5 years. They've been a top 4 team every year. What do they have to show for it? And then you consider they had a year in 2016 in which they were dead last, and that was the remnants of the process Browns, right? The Hugh Jackson 0-16, 1-15 back-to-back, 1 win in 2 years stretch of Cleveland. And what they have done since, there was a year in 2019 where they were conservative with cash, but every other year since, they've been top 10 in the NFL, right? And the Dolphins, for their part, if they were to stay in the top 10, they currently rank 10th in cash spend for 2025. It would be their 4th consecutive season and 5th in 6 years in which they rank inside the top 10. They also, the year that they were outside was 2021, and that was after in 2020, they spent a whole bunch of money in free agency on guys like Eric Flowers and Kyle Van Noy and Byron Jones, and they onboarded a whole bunch of big money players. Shaq Lawson got a $10 million per year contract in 2020, and they bounced out of a couple of those. And that happened to coincide with the COVID pandemic and the reduction in the salary cap, and a very unique circumstance, but they shedded money off of that. It's the only time they've gone backwards, and it's the only time that they've gone down from 2019 to 2024. The only time they've gone down from 1 year's ranking to the next was in 2021 when the pandemic hit and they offloaded the Kyle Van Noys and the Eric Flowerses of the world. So this is an extended period of time where you have ranked very competitively. And when you consider what the other teams look like that run through that red light of reality, and as compared to the Dolphins getting an unpleasant reality check with the direction that they were on with how things went in 2024, you could either say we're going to throw more cash and money at the problem, or alternatively, we're going to take this opportunity before we get so far gone chasing that one last breakthrough, especially because what is the ceiling of the team? What's been the ceiling of the team? So you're going to throw more cash at it for what? One more chance to do what? Have the magic run and put it all together and make it worth it? So we're going to talk about some of the trends, the data trends for cash spending. A couple of examples from elsewhere across the league. And some lessons from teams that remained competitive despite not spending more cash because it was the right thing to do to just buy more players. So we're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them for yourself. But if you're looking to transition beyond the usual pill, it's time to get Regeet Ready. Regeet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Regeet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in just 15 minutes. And effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked for you, Regeet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can do it completely online. Regeet connects you with a board-certified director and ships your shipment discreetly to your front door. Head to rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Okay. So I'm going to pull up the chart if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're not, it's no worries. We're going to talk through everything that you're going to see here on the program. Minnesota currently ranks first in the NFL in 2025 in cash spend. The Buffalo Bills are number 2. The first thing that stands out just through the top 2 teams, the Buffalo Bills, ranked 6th in cash spend in 21, 4th in 2022, 3rd in 2023, regressed from 3rd to 14th, and are now back up to 2nd because they redid Josh Allen's contract. But they went from 3rd to 14th, an 11-spot drop in cash spend in 2024. Why? They move on from Stephon Diggs. Right? Very easy identifying piece of where there was a big money player that this team chose to let walk. And the Bills, lo and behold, were not a worse football team despite letting Stephon Diggs walk in free agency. They let Gabe Davis walk in free agency. They transitioned away from Mitch Morse as a part of that process as well. There are a number of players that they chose to transition away from in hopes of becoming more sound for what the long term was going to look like for them. Now, they renegotiated down a contract with Dawson Knox as well. Then you think about the defensive side of the ball, and this was a part of that offloading process with names like Micah Hyde. They let Rasul Douglas walk this year in free agency. They have been transitioning at a number of different spots and drafting more in volume the last 2 years to be ready to replace outgoing veterans. Think about Osiris Torrance being drafted in 2023 to kind of be groomed to start. Dorian Williams to come in as a linebacker and prep for when Matt Milano leaves. Now, they negotiated Matt Milano down because he's had injuries the last couple of years. But then in 2024, it was Keon Coleman as the Gabe Davis replacement. It was Cole Bishop coming in and having an opportunity to compete with some guys that had been in-house to help replace Jordan Poyer, and Dwayne Carter coming in to be added to the defensive tackle rotation, and Cedric Van Granger in the 5th round as a guy that could potentially take the air as at center when they moved on from Mitch Morrison. Rave Davis coming in to be a new running back added, or as they're moving on from James Cook, right? Like, this is all forward-thinking, progressive, and that kind of falls in line. That kind of falls in line with what you saw some of from the Dolphins with their 24 draft class. I remember not being the only one very surprised that Patrick Paul got the call. But Patrick Paul got the call at left tackle in the 2nd round because they're in advance bracing for the long-term scope of the position amidst Teron Armstead and Chop Robinson, obviously with both Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips and their injury questions, having Chop Robinson come in and kind of be ready to answer that bell. And with Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson now gone, the Jalen Wright pick this year kind of felt like the same thing in the 4th round. But the problem was the Dolphins didn't have the draft capital. And we went over this yesterday. They did not have the draft capital to be able to have the pipeline well stocked. And as a result, you're leaning on more veteran players that have a higher minimum salary, require more in guarantees, are oftentimes less durable players, even if they're more established players that you feel like you know what you're getting. But then to tie it back into yesterday again, when those are less predictable players for how they're going to mesh within what you're trying to do because they've been indoctrinated somewhere else, that's where you get the problems you got last year for the Dolphins. So you've seen some signs and like the value put into net gains and losses in free agency to game the compensatory system. There's a lot of really good organizations that do that. Now, the Dolphins' results have not been in line with that, but that goes back to what we talked about yesterday. But you continue to look at some of these teams and what their trends are from a cash spend perspective. The San Francisco 49ers are another great example where the San Francisco 49ers, you go back to 2018, this team has ranked in the top 7 in cash spend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the last 8 years. 7 out of the last 8 years, top 7. And you say, well, they were close. They kept pushing. And I feel like the Dolphins now, there was a point along this plot line with San Francisco, who currently ranks 5th this year. And we're going to get into them and that 5th place ranking more in just a minute. There was a spot along this timeline where there were probably some parallels. The Dolphins didn't have the postseason breakthrough that San Francisco did, but obviously, coach from the same tree, similar ideologies, similar styles, similar offensive line philosophy, all that stuff, right? And the 49ers kept having these close calls. So there was incentive to, hey, let's sign Javon Hargrave in free agency. Hey, let's trade for Christian McCaffrey. Hey, let's make a splash here. Hey, let's bring everybody back and do one more thing. Hey, let's make sure we get Brandon Ayuk back under contract, even though we have Deebo Samuel and even though we have Juwan Jennings and all of that stuff, and this team got bailed out by Brock Purdy because this team also did not draft in the early chapters of drafts because they traded up for Trey Lance. And think about the 49ers, they pushed the limit, And then here they are this offseason. And who'd they lose this offseason? Who left this year from the San Francisco in free agency? Talanoa Hufanga is gone. Charvarius Ward is gone. Dre Greenlaw is gone. Javon Hargrave is gone. Aaron Banks is gone. Deebo Samuel is gone, traded. You can kind of continue to work your way through some more middle-class players off that roster. I mean, just Hufanga, Ward, Greenlaw, Hargrave, Malik Collins, defensive tackle. That's half of a pretty good defense in the NFL. And then you get into the offensive line play, and you get into Deebo Samuel. And Deebo was a nasty pill for San Francisco to swallow from a cap perspective because they did the contract and then kind of restructured it and pushed it down because they felt they were close. And now San Francisco's at a point where you lost almost double digit, like at least sufficient level starters. And some of those guys are in the prime of their career. Some of those guys are ascending talent. Not all of them. Hufanga's banged up. Greenlaw had the Achilles from the 23 season in the Super Bowl. But they had a monstrous exodus of talent. And the Dolphins had the same thing, but the Dolphins accelerated their own timeline disproportionately because of how they pursued the big contracts in lieu of almost double-digit draft picks that were almost all in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft. And somebody on Twitter made a good point to me yesterday, too, about this, that the Dolphins also got stripped of 2 top 100 draft picks, including a first-round pick for their misgivings with Sean Payton and Tom Brady, in addition to, as a part of the integrity of the game investigation that went in against the Dolphins with the Brian Flores allegations. So that doesn't help either. But that only further compounds your issues and underscores this is why the Dolphins are sitting here and not upping their offer by a few $1 million for a free agent corner when they feel like they've got the one that they like and they feel like it's a good price and they don't know what they're going to be on the hook for with Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey's got $21 million in guaranteed salary. And the Dolphins right now rank 10th in the NFL in cash spend for 2025. If they were to get rid of Jalen Ramsey, they would drop to 14th this year. And spoiler alert, I'll give you a little spoiler alert. I would be willing to bet that next year's free agency group is not a robust and profound spike back up either. I would be willing to bet next year will probably float somewhere in the middle class if things go well and you have the same nucleus of decision makers in place, and you'll probably have another neutral versus the league. You're going to get $36 million in cash that you're not going to pay Tyreek Hill. That could then in turn go to other players, and it's not guaranteed. So you're not going to be sitting here in August and July trying to get rid of it. You can move on from Tyreek Hill and take that $36 million and give it to the Jonnu Smiths and Zach Sealers of the world if they're asking for contracts, or go out in free agency and sign a Trayvon Moore because you need a safety and you feel like it's going to be there for you. But right now, you had to cycle down. Chris Kaufman calls it deleveraging. Some people call it a soft reset or a soft, I don't care what you call it. It's the circle of life in the NFL that is happening. And yet the question's still there every day. I can't believe they got $14 million in cap space. What are we waiting on? This is what we're waiting on, because you have to be fiscally responsible if you want to keep your job past one life cycle and doing the job. And that's where the Dolphins are at. The 19 to 24 Dolphins, the book is closed. That chapter of this team is over. It's the start of the next life cycle, and the first year is the foundational year to gain the clarity on who is running the team, should they be the people running the team, and you're getting your books rebalanced for the next 3-4 year cycle of aggressive spending. This is not Stephen Ross, tuck the checkbook away, and we're not allowed to buy any more players. There's nothing like that. Not how I interpret it, not off of what conversations I've been able to have with people. This is the health, the long-term and short-term health of the Dolphins organization all coincides and overlaps with this strategic decision to get your roster realigned with players that can buy in on your system, to get youth back on the roster, to have multi-year cost control players by focusing more on the NFL draft, by focusing on players that buy into your system, and not continuing to speed through the red lights that are screaming that you're at the tipping point, that if you keep going, there is no point of return. You will be the New Orleans Saints and you will be the Cleveland Browns. And that's not a world you want to live in, I promise. I don't care that the Cleveland Browns have been top 4 in cash spend the last 5 years. Look at their contracts. Look how rigid they are. We're going to talk about that next. You're on Locked On Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. Have you ever decided last minute that you want to get to the ballpark and get in a game with your friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands and experience it for yourself. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible because they make buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and lowest price guaranteed to take the worries out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On Major League Baseball. So if you want to catch a Marlins game, you can always find a deal on Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase today. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today for last-minute tickets with lowest prices, guaranteed. Before we get to the Browns, we've talked a little bit about Cleveland and San Francisco. Cleveland being the moral of the story. You don't have to just throw cash at your problems and solve your problems. We've talked about the Bills as being a team that had a competitive window cycle and then a soft reset with what they felt was comfortable, and then they still competed through it, and then their spending's back up, in large part because, even they let Von Miller walk this year, right? But the cash flow is up because they redid Josh Allen's contract that included a big signing bonus. That's going to push you up the charts. We talked about the 49ers as the team that had a little bit higher ceiling than the Dolphins did, and they kept pushing and just we're going to take one more year. We're going to take one more year. We're going to take one more year. We're close. One more piece, one more piece, one more piece. And then they had an exodus of like double-digit sufficient level starters off their roster, right? In the midst of playing Brock Purdy. And the only reason all those people didn't get fired is because Brock Purdy saved their skins. Make no mistake about that. We'll talk about the Rams, because the Rams are the really interesting team here. The Rams did the all-time extreme switch where they had spikes in cash flow in years that they went to the Super Bowl, and then the year that they actually won the Super Bowl, they were actually 25th in cash spending, and then ran that whole group back and were first in the NFL in cash spend. Everybody got hurt. They went from first to 32nd in the league in cash spend in one offseason. Guess which season they won twice as many games in? The year in which it was 32, and they had a bunch of draft picks and UDFAs on the roster. And then last year, they gave the Eagles everything they could handle. They were 31st in the NFL in cash spend because they had cost-controlled talent in mass. And make no mistake about it, if you take the Tyreek Hill and the Bradley Chubb and the Jalen Ramsey trades out of the picture for Miami, go back to 23, 24, 25 free agency cycles. This has not been a big spending team. This team has traded draft picks with cost-controlled talent for big names with big contracts, and oftentimes multiple cost-controlled contracts in exchange for one player. But it's not like this team has been doing like the Teron Armstead free agent signings and the Byron Jones free agent signings every year. It's kind of I thought the free agent stuff alone this year was pretty status quo for Miami. But there's a moral to be had there about the value of a life cycle. And the Rams now this year, with all of the momentum that they have in adding Devontae Adams and reworking out Matthew Stafford's contract, and right now they're looking at bringing Jalen Ramsey in. They're 29th in the NFL in cash spend this year. The Green Bay Packers had a 6-year stretch where they were top 12 5 out of 6 years. They obviously move on from Aaron Rodgers in there. They go from second in cash spend to 27th. They won more games with 27th in cash spend than when they were second. And now they're the youngest roster in football. They're coming off an 11-win season, and they're dead last in the NFL in cash spend this year. And that includes a quarterback contract that they just gave a quarterback contract to last year to Jordan Love. So I don't personally buy the idea. Now, the Dolphins still have holes. They still have a few needs that need to be addressed. For me, it's one more utility offensive lineman, and it's probably one corner, if not two. But I'm not going to get greedy and ask for two. Realistically, with all the young guys they have, it's probably one. They're going to sign somebody. They've shown the intent to do it. But this is what it looks like if you don't listen to the warning signs. This is what it looks like for you. I want to pull up the Cleveland Browns salary cap calculator to bring us to a close today. Wyatt Teller. Let's bring Wyatt Teller into the picture first here. We'll put him on a new tab. Why not? He's an expiring contract this year. If he is not signed to a contract extension this upcoming year, he will carry a $19.5 million dead cap to not be on the roster in void money in 2026 for Cleveland. You can do that with Joel Bitonio, $23.5 million in dead money from void years because they kept pushing and they've been top 4 in cash spend for 4 years now, and this is going on 5. And David Njoku, and maybe David Njoku gets a contract extension, but he's 29. You are looking at $24 million in dead cap for David Njoku. So Teller, Bitonio, Njoku, they're all between $19.5 and $24.3 million in dead cap in void years to not be on the roster in 2026 for the Browns. Think about that for a minute. And this wasn't like at stake for you this year if you were the Dolphins. But if you kept taking one more year, let's be aggressive in free agency and let's sign these guys and do all the max restructures for everybody and then spend and add more cash into it. And let's rank above Minnesota, who's first in the NFL in cash spend again. And let's do it again. That would put you at an unprecedented clip for where you would rank amongst these NFL teams. And again, the Dolphins are the only team in the NFL over the last 6 years to rank at least 13th or higher in cash spend in each of the last 6 seasons as things currently stand. I used the dreaded AI tools that exist. Gemini, I think it is with Google. And you can ask Google, who has the most top 10 cash spend seasons in the last 10 years. And it will analyze this chart. The Dolphins have 6. Only Jacksonville, Cleveland, and San Francisco have more. And we've talked about the stories that Cleveland and San Francisco have played out. Cleveland is in hell right now from a salary cap perspective. San Francisco just lost double-digit players because they pushed it too far. And they're still 5th in cash spend. So when you're asking yourself, why do the Dolphins care about the cash and why are they splitting hairs on Jalen Ramsey and why are they not raising their offers for corners? Whether you call it deleveraging or recalibrating or whatever you want to call it. This is the circle of life in the NFL realized. And the Dolphins are at a point where they're the last 6 years, like, I don't count this as year 7 of the build. It's not. They made a head coaching change in the middle of this, first of all. But most NFL team life cycles are 5, 6, 7 years. The Dolphins have told you this offseason their build was 6. It is over. If you want to classify it as an L, classify it as an L. They had successes, but not in the right time of year. They're unquestionably a more talented roster than what they were when the process started or before they started the process in 2018. But they didn't get the right accolades done at the right time of year for anybody to consider it a success. The playoff drought continues to live on. I can't argue that. I'm not going to argue that. But it's not year 7 of anything. It is over. It is a new operating life cycle that is going to have a foundational year at the beginning, and things are going to be calibrated. You're going to make decisions on who is doing things, with the hope being you get the inspiration you need from the people who have learned on the job for the past, in Mike's case, 3, and in Chris's case, 6. I don't count before 2019 for Chris. They give you the inspiration that you need to move forward with them. And they can use the elevated starting point from the past foundation as the new foundation that the new house is built on. And I, for one, personally, I am glad that there is restraint to not push it one more year. Because when you push it like that, things get real ugly. That's going to do it for us here today. Locked On Dolphins, your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.